Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we are going to be looking at Holo Taco's latest collection called Coastal CRÈMES. As you can see, this is a massive 8-piece lineup of these creamy sun-drenched colors, and there's also a limited edition canvas tote bag that's available only as a gift with purchase when you buy the whole collection between June 18th and the 22nd, or while supplies last. So as always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end of the video after some comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. So going in sort of rainbow order, we're starting with Boardwalk Behaviour, and this one is described as a medium bright pink. I would say that's pretty accurate. It is a mid-tone shade of pink, a little bit on the warm side, which I think will be noticeable later during the comparison portion. And yeah, because it's a Holo Taco cream, it had a fantastic formula, super full coverage on the first coat, and fully opaque in two. Personally, I didn't find any of these to be super thick or anything, but I feel like that can happen with Holo Taco cream, so you might need some thinner. I just personally don't mind a thicker formula because they're especially useful for nail art. And my full hand swatches also show 2 coats with a glossy top coat. Next we have Summer Scandal, and this one is described as a bright coral. I would say that is accurate for the photo on the little info card, but on the nail, it's not really what I would call a bright shade, but it's not so muted that it's a pastel, if that makes sense. It's just kind of somewhere in between a pastel and like a bleached neon, where I would at least call that bright. And don't get me wrong, I do still really love this color. I love a coral for summer, so I did find this one to be really flattering. I know sometimes the more intense or really vibrant kind of shades can be a little overpowering depending on people's skin tone. So I think generally this does have a nice level of saturation. I definitely enjoyed it in direct sun. The next shade we have is Creamsicle Coast, and this one is described as a peachy yellow. And I definitely think that's a very fitting way to describe this because it is perfectly in between a peach and yellow, which I know not a lot of people might enjoy, but I am a huge fan of those two colors, so I love anything that's in between. And yeah, I thought this one was super gorgeous. Again, obviously a fantastic formula, even for being such a lighter shade. It didn't feel chalky at all, and it was perfectly opaque for me in just 2 coats again. I feel like this almost reminds me of a pastel version of a mac and cheese color. The next shade in the lineup is called Saltwater Taffy, and this one is described as a vibrant aqua mint. Obviously, love this color. I feel like it's such a classic shade for the summertime. This one is definitely really vibrant, which I appreciated because I feel like, some of the others so far were just a little softer. Again, not quite pastels, but just softer shades than what I typically love for summer, which are much brighter, punchier colors. But yeah, this one was just super gorgeous and another flawless 2-coater. The next shade we have is Pier Pressure, and this one is described as a bright ocean teal, which, yes, you did hear that correctly. This is a teal and not a sky blue like you're seeing. Unfortunately, when it comes to these very true sort of teal colors, my iPhone just picks them up as more blue than they are. It's just really hard to capture that drop of green that makes it a teal. So apologies that I couldn't get this color accurate. I imagine this is going to be one that is gonna look a lot more blue in the photos. So just imagine this to be a little bit more teal. Like, there is a whisper of green in there, but it is a gorgeous color regardless. I love that it's described as an ocean teal because it is like a very blue leaning shade, and I feel like this was honestly really close to being a 1-coater, but I still did 2 coats. We have another blue in the lineup, and this one is called Midnight Marina. and it's described as a bleached indigo blue, which honestly I think is really accurate. You'll be able to see more of that indigo later in the comparison portion, because initially I just was seeing this as like a really dusty medium blue shade, and I would also agree with it being sort of a bleached shade, not quite a bleached neon, but a bleached shade. Super beautiful. I love the color, but I have to say this is unfortunately one of the smelliest polishes. I feel like Holo Taco blues just have a tendency to really stink, so unfortunately as soon as I opened it, it just was bad news. The good news is that I think this could be another one coater, so at least you wouldn't have to smell it for that long. If you can believe it, another purple has hit Holo Taco's catalog. This one is called Dockside Drama, and it's described as a bright fuchsia purple. And I would say that's pretty accurate. This one is definitely very vibrant of the bunch, definitely the closest to what I would call like a bleached neon shade, and I'm pretty sure I would agree with calling it a fuchsia purple as well. When I think of fuchsia, I think of a more pinky leaning shade, so to call this a fuchsia purple obviously is kind of the same as calling it a very warm or red toned purple, which is accurate. I think you can especially see that sort of fuchsia pink color a little bit more in the sun, almost making it lean in like that magenta family. Honestly, any kind of like fuchsia magenta sort of color, I just have a hard time describing the differences between them, but either way, it's a really bright and fun shade for summer. And rounding out the collection, we have Serving Sherbert, which is described as a light salmon pink. And I definitely would agree with that color description. I would say this one, along with the peachy yellow, are probably the closest to being pastel shades. This one is definitely a lot softer and more muted, or just less vibrant in color than I was expecting, but I still found it pretty. It's kind of like a summer neutral for me in a way, where I know not everybody's gonna love a peachy pink necessarily, or, you know, a pastel coral, but I just personally find them flattering. But I do wish this still had a little bit more vibrancy, kind of pushing it into a bleached neon category, or just to better match the color on the little info card that has the swatches of these, because that shade looked really pretty. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Coastal CRÈMES collection, again in 2 coats each with a glossy top coat. I think this color story is just super beautiful, and they look so great in direct sun. Moving on to comparisons, I unfortunately only have photo comparisons because I obviously don't have any of the original Holo Taco cream. So first we're looking at Boardwalk Behaviour. Next to the floor is Guava. Boardwalk Behaviour is definitely a few shades lighter and cooler toned in comparison, just more pink in general. I think the floor is Guava is closer to a warmer red coral. For some pinks I actually have, I pulled out ILNP's Cupid and Olive's Bubble, which came out recently in their summer collection. That one is described as a warm toned sort of medium pink, but it is a little bit more coral leaning in comparison to Boardwalk Behaviour, while Cupid is more of a true pink, but it is a few shades darker. I thought the closest pink that I had to this was Zoya's K, which is just a mid-tone pink, and I also wanted to show Mooncat's Koi Whiskers, which is a thermal and admittedly more of a corally leaning color in the cold state, which I have 2 coats on the swatch stick because I was running really warm. But value-wise, I would say both of these are incredibly similar, but they are still both a little bit warmer than Boardwalk Behaviour. And lastly, I'm also going to be showing some photo comparisons to some KBShimmer creams because I thought there were some similarities. So here is Playing Hard to Get. I think this is the closest to Boardwalk Behaviour, but I think it might be a little bit lighter or brighter. Moving on to Summer Scandal, I'm bringing back Olive's Bubble and Mooncat's Koi Whiskers since, again, those were a little bit more coral leaning in color compared to Boardwalk Behaviour, but then seeing these two next to Summer Scandal still don't really compare. I feel like they both are maybe warmer, almost more pink leaning. Summer Scandal's leaning more of like a corally orange, so I figured I could show this next to some other oranges like Crack's Papaya or Footworthy, but those are super different. And I figured I could also show this next to ILNP's Sunny Days. I thought this was going to be a little closer to the color of Summer Scandal, but it leans a little bit more orange in comparison, and it's a lot more vibrant, more of a bleached neon. I, of course, have a few more corally shades, so I pulled out Olive Ave's Crake, which is a kind of darker, more reddy coral color. So I actually think their shade Theoretical looked a lot closer, especially in the bottle. I feel like the base color looks really similar, but as is the case with a lot of Olive Ave shades, it ends up drying down a little darker, not to mention it has a gold shimmer. And like I said before, Crake is darker, but it actually is closer to what I was seeing on the info card. I even have a couple of mainstream comparisons to share, so here I pulled out Essie's Tart Deco on the left and Stones and Roses on the right. I at first thought of Stones and Roses, but then seeing it next to Summer Scandal, it just looks a bit more muted and it's a lot more apparent on the nail. So then I remembered Tart Deco, and I think that's probably the closest to a dupe. It's like almost the exact same value. Maybe Tart Deco is a shade lighter and also maybe more orangey or just less pink. And here I have OPI's Time for a Napa, which is another sort of corally shade. This I thought was going to be an exact dupe because they just look incredibly close in the bottle, but on the nail you can see a difference where I would say that Time for a Napa is a little bit more pink leaning. Then for the photo comparisons, here is Summer Scandal next to Holo Taco's One Melon Followers, which was retired maybe a year or so ago. That one's a little bit more of a pastel coral, if that makes sense. And then from KBShimmer, I think their shade Smack Talking is the closest to Summer Scandal, but that one's a lot brighter, almost like a neon. For Creamsicle Coast, I wanted to quickly show this next to Olive Ave's Tang and Cracked Polish's Instant Mood Booster, which are a tangerine orange and bright sunshine primary yellow respectively. So you can see that Creamsicle Coast is kind of an in-between of these two, but slightly more pastel. So I thought these couple of shades from ILNP would be even closer. We have Cream Pop and Honeybee, which came out in their Heat Waves collection last summer. So these I would say are kind of in that same color family. They are a little bit more orange and yellow respectively, so Creamsicle Coast is a nice in-between of these two, maybe leaning a little closer to the orange. Some other shades I thought were kind of similar were Mooncat's Acidic and this super old polish from Glisten and Glow called Great Balancing Act. That one I would consider more of like a mac and cheese color, so I think Acidic is a little closer because it's more pastel, but slightly more orange leaning. Since Creamsicle Coast looks a lot brighter, like more of this whitened shade, I then pulled out Sinful Colors Skylark and Color Department's Peach Perfection, which are a peach and sort of pastel yellow with a lot of white in them. So next to these, they read as more true pastels compared to the Holo Taco that's a little bit brighter. For the photo comparisons, here is Creamsicle Coast next to Butterscotch Hop, which I believe is a few shades darker, potentially slightly warmer leaning. And I think the closest shade KBShimmer had is called Push Your Luck, which I would call more of a creamsicle orange as opposed to a peachy yellow. Moving on to Saltwater Taffy, we of course are looking at it next to David's Teal and also ILNP's Bottoms Up, which is a little bit closer because it's more of that green leaning color, while David's Teal is more of a true teal. But either way, Bottoms Up is still a few shades too dark. Then I pulled out Mooncat's Paradise Found and Olive Ave's Ambrose, which I thought were a little bit closer. From the bottle shot alone, it kind of looks like Mooncat might be an exact dupe, but on the nail it is a few shades lighter, more pastel and not as vibrant, while Ambrose is a little bit darker, also not as vibrant, but more green leaning. For drugstore brands, I have Essie's It's High Time from a previous spring collection and OPI's I'm Yacht Leaving, which is a bit more teal. That one's closer to David's Teal, for example. So while the Essie is more of a mint color, it's a little too pastel and not as vibrant. And for photo comparisons, I'm assuming Saltwater Taffy is going to be the closest to Seafoam Home, but I think Seafoam Home is a little bit lighter. It just looks more white based, at least to me. And then from KBShimmer, I think their closest shade is It Comes in Waves, but that one's a little bit darker and maybe slightly more teal leaning as opposed to minty. Next for Pier Pressure, we're looking at it next to David's Teal and OPI's I'm Yacht Leaving, since those two were a bit more teal. But as you can probably see, Pier Pressure is a bit darker than both of these and a little bit more blue leaning. Again, I'm sorry that this isn't color accurate, but they're definitely not dupes. I also want to show Pier Pressure next to a couple of true blues for comparison. So here is Color Department's Hydrated, which is like a true sky blue, and Cracked Polish's Fresh Pedicure, which is kind of a mid-toned cobalt shade. I think the closest blue from Olive Ave is LA Looks, where it has like a drop of green. It's not a true sky blue, even though again it kind of looks that way on camera, but there's not enough green that it would make it a teal, so these are still very different. I actually think the closest color match is Holo Taco's Funny Feeling, which is a thermal from a previous anniversary collection. It is just a couple of shades darker, though the shimmer color in Funny Feeling almost makes it look more similar, if that makes sense. So if you happen to have that shade, you kind of have an idea of what color Pier Pressure actually is. For the photo comparisons, I only have the one for Holo Taco because KBShimmer just doesn't have anything quite like this. So here is a picture of Scientific, which is a very true, like vibrant sky blue. So it's a different shade of blue and a lot lighter too. Moving on to Midnight Marina, here it is next to Olive Ave's Skylight and ILNP's High Score, which are a more true blue and purple respectively. So hopefully you can see that Midnight Marina kind of has this indigo kind of quality, just a lot more muted and desaturated, but perfectly in between these two. So it kind of reminded me of a dark periwinkle, so I figured I could also quickly show this next to Peri-Social, but that's a pastel, so very obviously not dupes. The closest that I have to a dupe though is OPI's Charge It to the Room, which looks like a very similar, super muted indigo kind of shade, but the OPI is a couple of shades lighter. So it's not an exact dupe, but definitely in the same family. And for photo comparisons, here is Holo Taco's Board Meeting, which I think is like a very classic sort of cobalt blue, definitely not as indigo or muted as Midnight Marina. And in a similar vein from KBShimmer, their closest shade is called To the Max, which again I think is a little bit more of a cobalt blue. For Dockside Drama, I did want to show this next to Crack's Vacation Mode and Olive Ave's Afterglow, which I thought were the closest when it comes to these sort of magenta, red-leaning purple colors, but they are both very, very different, as I'm sure you can tell from the bottle shot alone. Vacation Mode is a lot lighter, while Afterglow is a lot darker. For photo comparisons, I'm assuming Dockside Drama is going to be the closest to Work Bestie, being a very red tone purple, but to me, Work Bestie does look a few shades darker. And in a similar vein from KBShimmer, I think their closest shade is called Net Gains, being this really warm toned purple shade, but I think it is a little darker, maybe more neutral too. I'm pretty sure though Dockside Drama is going to be the closest to Mooncat's Lost Polaroids, which I obviously don't have anymore. It's kind of hard to tell exactly because some photos can look a little bit lighter, but I think these are the closest. For Serving Sherbert, I thought the closest shade that I had to this was Mooncat's Lucid Dream, which I feel like is looking very peachy orange on camera, but in real life it is a little bit warmer toned, though it's not as salmony pink as the Holo Taco. I'm honestly not sure if my bottle of Lucid Dream has faded at all, because from what I remember, it used to look a salmony pink. And then I pulled out Holo Taco's Pinky Swear and ILNP's Patisserie from their brunch collection earlier this spring. That one's slightly more of a terracotta shade and it dries down a lot darker on the nail, while Pinky Swear is more of a pastel pink. And lastly, for the photo comparisons, I first wanted to show One Melon followers. I know I shared it earlier, but I feel like it was kind of looking like a pastel coral, but I think it's still too dark compared to Serving Sherbert. So I could see this one being a little closer to Rest in Peach, for example. Like, these are probably the closest value-wise, but obviously Rest in Peach is a little bit more peachy and not as pink. And I think the closest shade KBShimmer has is Guava Nice Day, which is a little bit more of a guava pink, so maybe more saturated in color. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Holo Taco's new Coastal CRÈMES collection. These are available now as part of their permanent catalog, so I will have their website down below. And as a reminder, if you do pick up the whole collection, you can receive the Holo Taco limited edition tote bag as a gift with purchase only between the 18th and the 22nd while supplies last. So here is a full look at the tote bag. It just has like the logo, the branding, symbols, you know, on the front and the back as well, although it says have some fun before you die with like some rainbow kind of detailing as well. It's a sort of thick black canvas, and there's also this little like magnetic button to close it. And on the inside, there are these two sort of little pockets. This is for like your phone on the side. It's kind of like along the front edge here. And then here is a larger kind of sized pocket. There's no zippers or anything like that. Generally a nice tote bag. I'm almost surprised they didn't like release this as separate merch. I get the appeal of like a gift with purchase, but I almost wish it was like not black so that it could fit better with like the theme for this collection, since this is a gift with purchase for this collection. But I'm assuming we'll probably see this again in the future. But yeah, as far as the collection goes, I of course would love to hear your thoughts on them, because I had a little bit of a roller coaster of an experience. I had completely missed any sort of like social media posts about these coming out. So the very first time that I saw like the colors was with their little informational card here. And I'm not gonna lie, you know, I know this is gonna sound dramatic, but I kind of squealed. I was like, oh my God, these are so pretty. Like, they're so bright and colorful. Call me basic, but you know, I love a good cream polish, especially for the summertime, and just like the color palette. It's so beautiful. But then once I started unboxing them, like, you know, I'm not sure how well you can tell from here, but I noticed that they were a lot paler than what I was, you know, expecting based off of this photo. And yeah, it's just kind of a shame. I mean, it's not super surprising because it is not the first time that Christine's swatches have sort of let me down. So I was a little bit bummed at first, but once I tried them myself and, you know, I saw how pretty they were, especially in direct sunlight, I was like, okay, these are still beautiful. I still really like them. But then I realized I think the main reason I do like them is because I just don't have the originals that are like now discontinued from Holo Taco, because, you know, similar to last month's collection, these are giving we already have this at home, or close enough, welcome back, whatever polish. So don't get me wrong, I totally can recognize that and like understand and like agree to an extent, because I know they aren't like dupes. I know, again, I'm sorry I didn't have the originals to do like direct comparisons with them, but I feel like I do have a good eye for color and like telling the subtle differences between polishes. So I do feel pretty confident in like my assessment in how different these are. But at the end of the day, a cream is a cream, you know, they're a dime a dozen. So while this is just another collection, I still thought they were really pretty. I did enjoy them. I think there's going to be some great nail art potential, which is why I'm personally looking forward to using them again. And similar to their last release, I also just greatly appreciate that these are part of their permanent catalog and not intentionally limited edition releases, because as we all know, Holo Taco, at least out of the boutique brands, does the most limited edition stuff. So yeah, not a revolutionary collection by any means, but I still thought they were beautiful and definitely a lovely color palette. Hopefully they'll serve for some just great color inspiration for people to shop their stash. But I would love to hear what you think down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!